Stephanie.
All right.
Okay, we'll call this meeting to order. Welcome, everyone. And we'll start out with roll call.
Tony Doan,
Here.
Meg Haley, Quinn, Packer. John Napier's not on it no more. Mike Six, Dave Cocott, Ricky Campbell,
Here.
Ken Brulette,
Here.
Chris Seaman,
Here.
Corey Thomas,
I'm here.
welcome. Matthew Campbell,
Sorry about that. Present.
Paul Clark, Kevin Marr,
I'm here.
okay. Zach Tuck.
Here.
Oh, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We got 9. We needed 6 or 7. All right, so we have a quorum.
Excellent. Thank you, Ray. All right, so we'll go ahead and review and approve the agenda. That's agenda item number 2. So open it up for comments. If not, looking for a motion.
This is Quinn. I'll make a motion.
Thank you.
Second.
Matthew with a second. Thank you. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor, aye.
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 Okay, any against? All right, motion carries. We'll move on to agenda item number 3, which is review and approve summary minutes from 7/14 tag meeting. Ray's pulling those up now. Thank you, Ray.
Mhm. Oops.
Okay, let's go ahead and take a quick look at this, and then unless someone has some changes, we'll do the same
Ray,
thing.
I think I was present on
You
the
were present?
14th. Yeah.
Is that you, Chris? Yeah,
Yep.
okay. I will add you. I will edit those after this meeting and fix that.
Did Mike Six take John's place? John
Yeah, I
Napier?
think he was the alternate anyway, so we automatically would.
Okay. Okay, any other changes that need to be made? Okay, looking for a motion to approve.
To approve the minutes as amended.
Thank you, Chris.
Second.
Thank you, Kevin. Discussion? All those in favor, aye.
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 Any against? Okay, motion carries. Thank you. Okay, let's jump to number 4, which is our change proposals, which we've been on this trip for a while now, and so we're going to continue that. There's a couple things that there's one thing that I want to start with on the proposals, and I'll wait for Ray to get those pulled up.
Oh, all right. Can you see those, or do I need to reshare?
No, it's good. You're good.
Okay.
So on proposal number, the log number, let me see if I can find this here. Log number 55. Last meeting, we had a special work group put together. I started the review of chapter 33, and after looking at the scope of what's going to be involved in looking at that, I would like to just table this until probably our last August meeting, and that would give enough time to review some things a little more in depth, and that way we can come to the table with a more complete presentation on that. And so that's kind of where we're at with that one. So we're not going to discuss that one today. We're going to give that a little more time, so that special work group has some time to go over some things. So with that, I think what we would like to start with, if able, which I don't know that they're in the room, but we do have some people in industry that have some proposals, and that would be, I think, Sound Transit. Are they on it all right now, Ray?
I thought I see, I'm looking at the attendance here and I'm not seeing Mark. I thought I saw that he logged in, but
Yeah, I did too for a second. I don't know.
I'm participants. I'm not seeing him now.
Okay,
We can, if he chimes in, it'll ring on my end, and then we can jump to his next if that sounds like something you'd like to do.
sure. And how do we feel about log number 33? Because that one is Libby Wagner for the adult family home sprinkler system, but the codes were IFC, IBC, IRC. Did Libby or anyone that was proposing this change, do you know if they have been at the building code tag or the building tag to present this already?
Stoyan's on, maybe he might be able to answer that. I don't mean to, he probably wasn't prepared for that, but I just thought maybe if it rung a bell.
I'm not drinking yet, so I am. So I think we discussed it a few meetings ago. I don't have access to the file, so I can't remember what was the result of it, but we talked about it. When John is back,
Can you hear
I
me,
think-
Tony?
Yeah,
Sorry, I had you muted. I have Mark Murray on the phone. He's on a different link with 4 other people right now, so I'm going to try to get them onto this call. So stand by.
thanks, Ken. Go ahead, Stoyan.
So again, I know we talked about it, but I don't have access to the document, so I can't remember what the outcome was.
Okay, all right. I wonder if that one would be a good one to table. And if we could just make a note, Ray, just as a reminder for me, especially to maybe take a look at what was discussed. And that would give us a little background just in case Libby Wagner doesn't show up to the remaining few tags we have left here for the proposals, then we can have a little background. So we'll table that one until we can see what building's done on it and we get a little more information. So that way we're consistent.
And I'll reach out to her too.
Okay,
And let her know we have a tag meeting that she can attend, and yeah, we'll compare notes from the building CAG as well.
okay, thank you, Ray. So with that, Ken, are we ready for them to jump in, or do we want to wait a little bit?
I'm wondering what link they clicked on.
So this is Paul. I think I clicked on the link that came through the server. I don't know if
On the Gov delivery.
yeah, on the Gov delivery.
I'll double check that real quick. After the meeting, hopefully we get everybody on.
Mark's joining right now, so that's
Yeah.
I think we're ready for it. Welcome, Mark.
Good morning.
Sorry about that, Mark.
No worries.
So we were just discussing our log number, looks like 68, which is for the Sound Transit. Is that the one that you'll be speaking on, Mark?
Correct.
Okay.
What number was that, Tony?
68.
68. Okay. Right.
Okay, we have it up in front of us now. And Mark, if you're ready, the floor is yours. If you'd like us to come back to this, to give you some time, we can. If we need to do another proposal, but if you're ready, it's all you.
Oh, that's fine. Yeah, so I assume everyone's had a chance to see this. This proposal was developed to provide some clarification about requirements for fire protection for open stations. So open stations is defined in NFPA 130, and it's basically, usually it's an at-grade or an elevated station, but it's a station that's open to atmosphere where smoke and heat will readily vent, as compared to an enclosed station, which is more like a tunnel station, an underground station common to the stations in downtown Seattle. So while this addresses both of those, the real drive for the need for this proposal is to clarify the requirements for open stations, and it came up while we were discussing a station and design in Seattle, where we had a elevated station in North Seattle. The station platform is considered an A3 occupancy. And while there's really not a lot there, there's just basically a platform and a metal canopy, and then some open stairs down to the plaza below. It can be interpreted as requiring fire protection throughout by the building code for an A3 occupancy above grade. So this particular part of the code is not real clear. A number of jurisdictions have interpreted it differently. Some jurisdictions have not required fire protection in this kind of a station. Others have, and so the intent of this was to get a proposal at the state level for a consistent application of the code. And we work closely with the Seattle Fire Department and Seattle Building Department to gain consensus locally for that station as part of putting this proposal together for the state. I also conferred with Lee Kranz in Bellevue, so he was aware of it and talked about it with some reps in Bellevue. So we got some good feedback from them. And the idea is that an open station would still have fire protection in areas where there may be combustibles, and those are pretty limited in an open station, but there are some areas that NFPA 130 calls for fire protection. It talks about, in 130, it talks about spaces that are used for concessions and similar spaces like that. We don't have any concessions in our stations. It's all transportation related. But there are some rooms. There's a comm room, there's a fire control center, there's sprinklerizer room, there's electrical rooms, there's a number of ancillary rooms that are enclosed. And this proposal would require fire protection in those enclosed rooms in those stations, but it wouldn't require fire protection at the canopy level. And that was the big issue that seemed to really not add a lot of value, to have fire protection at the canopy level. In these stations, there's really just not a whole lot that would ever fuse a sprinkler head, so it didn't seem like a good use of resources and public money. So that's the general gist of it. We've got some exceptions in there. There's an exception in there for an at-grade station. We have not seen jurisdictions requiring fire protection for at-grade stations anywhere that I'm aware of. But we wanted to just include that just for clarity. And we actually put a limit on it based on the ancillary space, just so that it's clear that it applies to a typical station and not a central hub of any kind, just outlying stations. And I think that's the quick overview of this. There's a few other odds and ends in this as well, but the primary purpose was to get the clarity on the fire protection for the open stations.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Appreciate that. Let's go ahead and open it up to comments and discussion for our tag.
Yeah, this is Quinn here. I just had a quick clarification question. Mark, how did you come up with that 1,500 square foot ancillary area? Because I'm looking at IBC for, accessory areas, square footage, and it's typically 10%. So, would it ever be beyond 10%, with that 1,500 square foot?
Well, it's the reason that we came up with 1,500 square feet is because if you're trying to define the station by the area of the building, it's pretty hard to do that, because sometimes we'll have canopies that would be considered building area, right? Just basically weather canopies. But depending on the design, you might have a number of different canopies separated with an air gap, right? A separation. So trying to figure out the building area for an at-grade station was difficult. So we thought, well, let's define the threshold by using the ancillary space. And I think that number is somewhat arbitrary, but there is a section in the fire code that talks about a threshold for fire protection. And I can't remember exactly where I found that, but it may have been for a particular application, a basement or something like that. But it isn't there. There is something in the fire code that defines 1,500 square feet as a threshold for protection in certain cases. So it seemed like a reasonable number that to use. And maybe in the commentary, I don't know that I included that or not, but it's possible that I included that note to explain that number. I'll take a look here. And if it's not there, I can certainly go back and review my notes and get that information and provide it.
So would it make sense, and this is just a thought, would it make sense to maybe add language that says 1,500 square feet or 10%, whichever is less?
The problem with the 10% is trying to come up with a building area. Like the canopy itself may only be 3,000 square feet, right? In total. So 10% of that would be 300, right? So then you would be putting fire protection pretty much at all of them, I think, if you use the 10% rule.
Mark, is it possible that you got the 1,500 square feet from the A5 criteria for concession stands?
That could be. Yeah, where did that come from?
I could be off base here, but Ray, will you go to page 5 on this document? There is mention of the 1,500 square feet. On that.
There it is. I do have it in the commentary. IBC requires fire protection in underground buildings and floors without openings that are greater than 1,500 square feet. Yeah, so that was the basis of that number.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Is there any other discussion?
I have some questions about just general process, or can we add amendments to an NFPA standard in the fire code? Because that's what looks like we're doing for a lot of this.
I think what we would be doing is we'd be making an amendment, we'd be making a Washington State code in lieu of the NFPA standards. So.
Okay.
Does that make sense? So we'd be writing an amendment to the IBC that would, it would be basically the NFPA standards, but it would be a guidance off an amendment, not through the standard.
Is that?
Well, that's not
elsewhere?
how, what we did in Seattle is we said, you know, it's already referenced in chapter 80, but then we created a new chapter like we did, like we're doing here, but we'll have to renumber this chapter because this won't work for us. So we'll renumber this chapter to a different chapter. But then we basically put out that NFPA 130 is a 2020 edition is adopted. And and then there's the following amendments. And then we just bring up the following amendments, like how it's printed here. And that's how we did it through our legal process with the city of Seattle. It's our code, it's a chapter, it's referenced, and the amendments to that. So yeah, this is something that hasn't been done before in the state. So I'm thinking that's the right method of doing it.
The adoption process permits amendment, whereas you can't amend a reference document within the model code.
Was that a statement or question, Matt?
Yeah.
So I apologize. That was my interpretation of in seeking affirmation from Ken that's what he was.
Gotcha.
The gist of what he was saying.
Yeah, because we've already amended out. Just think what Dave Cocott's thing was with the elevators. We were amending out a part of NFPA. We did that in chapter 80, So we're doing the same thing. We're amending an NFPA document, but we're doing it in this other chapter. So yes.
Mark, I just got a question. My name is Ricky Campbell. I'm with UA Local 699 Sprinkler Fitters. And these open stations, these are just for pedestrian access to light rail and whatnot, right?
That's correct.
There's no vehicle parking or anything like that, right?
No, not as part of the station. We do often have parking garages that are co-located with stations, but they're separate buildings.
Okay, yeah. Thank you for the clarification.
Okay, any further discussion on this?
Did we have a chapter number that we wanted to put this in and renumber this?
And also, is this something that should be in the building code? Is this a design requirement or an inspection requirement?
NFPA 130 is a design standard.
And so there is part of this is in the building code too. And Mark, I understand, did present this to the building code tag last week.
That's right. Yeah, they had a few questions, but it was approved. And if you go to the top, it actually is, this proposal is intended to amend both the IBC and the IFC.
Mark, at the building tag, was there discussion as far as where this would be implemented? Like in a separate chapter or section?
Yeah, within the IBC, it would be accounted for in what was it, chapter 31, I believe, of the building code.
Okay.
31.114, like it's on here. Is that what?
That's right. That's the section. That's right.
Okay.
Chapter 31 of the building code is kind of a catch-all for kind of special. I believe I'd have to go look at it, but it's a unique
Special
chapter.
construction.
Yeah, special.
So in the fire code, it would be 4001 and 903.
But we want to renumber the 40, right? Because of the new chapter, which is storage of distilled spirits and wines, chapter 40, that's in the IFC.
Yeah, we would.
So do we want to put that towards the end? So then we don't have to keep moving it. I think that might have been the recommendation of somebody at the beginning, was to put this towards the end, like a, 48 or 49.
Yeah, do we have any proposals or motions for that, or any agreement or disagreement on where we put it?
We didn't on the tag level. I think we never really decided. We just decided that we wanted to put it at the end of no matter what chapter it was, just so we don't, because this will be the second code cycle we're moving this because we bumped it just one up, and so now we're moving it again.
Okay. So do we want to go the end then? Well, no, we can't do that though. We can't do the end of 40 though. Isn't that correct? Or I'm all backwards here.
Yeah, I'm just thinking where we have the reserved chapters and they go up to 49, right?
Yeah, 41 through 49. Okay,
Yeah.
now I'm on the same page with you.
Okay, so I'm thinking that we just maybe put it at a 48. And the only reason I say that is that, Mark, is there any proposals like for a 502 stuff to do?
I don't have, or NFPA 502.
Yeah.
I don't have any proposal to modify that. No, I know Seattle on that. in the city, but yeah, we haven't really focused on that much.
Okay.
I'm good with 48 if everyone else is.
Can anybody else remember, did we have to move marijuana, or was that the model code that moved it? Because I thought we did something similar with the marijuana code extraction, or is that 30?
That-
Model code moved it.
Oh, okay, so it wasn't, okay. Oh, I think, didn't the model code, I thought maybe I'm getting mixed up with this one.
The model code sucked it up into it, so
Yeah,
it moved.
so that's why I think we're moving the transit one, right? Anyways, it's because of that one?
That and the distilled spirits one that
Yeah.
Ken mentioned.
Yeah. Okay, so did we decide on 48?
Yes.
Hey, Tony, this is Kevin. I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Kevin.
And maybe Ken could answer this too. It sounds like this is going to be put in the building code and the fire code. How does correlation between the two? And does it need to belong in both of them?
Well, that's a great point. It's something that we've proposed to work with the building tag to do some correlation stuff. And so my guess is at this point is that it's going to end up in a separate section of the building code than it is the fire code. And as far as correlation with 903, we do have members from the building tag on our group. And so we're hoping that it translates that way. And I'll let Ken speak to that more.
Yeah, so what I think is going to happen, Kevin, is that if you look at page 2, page 2 has it as 3114.2. That's the building code number, and it says as modified below. So we're, so it'll be in chapter 31 is going to have all of the modifications to NFPA 30 listed, just like we're going to have in our chapter 48. So it should marry up together.
And we will probably in the building have a pointer to the fire code of chapter, it'll be 48.
Okay.
Yeah, but it should be a reprint. It should be a reprint in 31.
Yeah.
But then you mentioned too that this really needs to get renumbered and reformatted a little bit, doesn't it?
Well, the wherever it says 4,000 and 4,000 is going to get changed to 4801, like under scope. And so, but then the numbers underneath, like, and I'm looking at page 2 right now, where it starts going into the 3.3.44.2, that is just the NFPA 130 numbering. So
Yeah. So that's all got to change.
no, that's going to stay the same. We're not going to
keep
change
that the same.
Yeah, because we're referencing the NFPA 130/2020 version, and we've said, okay, it's you have to be in accordance with that, and then but as modified below, and the as modified below, we're showing those sections that are in 130 and how they're being modified.
Okay.
So it's what we did, and it's how we did it in Seattle too. We just amended NFPA 130 and just printed those sections. Yeah, it worked. I mean, it got through our legal just fine.
Okay. I'm just trying to think back on if there's other sections in the IFC that are similar to this where we're amending standards and putting that in the fire code. And I can't think of any. So I think this is kind of something new here. I just want to make sure that it's done correctly.
Yeah, it's absolutely new by doing it this way, but it's the only way I think that we can do it.
Okay.
Yeah, see one more spot where you want to make that change, right there in the middle of the page, 4001. Yeah, just a little lower under the exception. And there you go. I think those are
Mark, is enclosed defined? When
It is, it's
enclosed
defined
station is a defined term?
it's defined in NFPA 130, and those definitions are unamended. We are just leaving those as is, and then yeah, you can go look at those, but enclosed basically means it's a tunnel station, or it's a station where there's enough enclosure that smoke and heat would not effectively vent. And that would be kind of a judgment call. The AHJ can make that determination if it's unclear. The requirements for enclosed stations is much higher for obvious reasons.
Okay. Any further questions, discussions, comments?
Yeah, I guess we're still in the opinion talking about it phase. I personally don't like the idea of putting the NFPA amendments in this code. I think it's confusing. I think the whole chapter's confusing. And I don't know that I'm convinced that the benefit is there, considering how small. So we're talking about the Sound Transit line, really, is what we're talking about, the light rail line, which impacts, the total number of stations we're talking about is not gigantic. And the total number of jurisdictions impacted is not gigantic either. I think NFPA 130 is definitely the appropriate standard for stuff like that, but I think we're going through a lot of effort and adding a lot of bulk to our code for the benefit of a small set of projects.
So how I look at this is similar, but also different. We already have chapter 40. We already say that you shall build it to NFPA 130. The problem is that NFPA 130 standard needs to be amended for our local requirements and our local issues that Sound Transit has brought up. Where to show in the state of Washington what those amendments need to be has to be someplace. And so people aren't jumping around to several different documents. The most appropriate place I see is to keep it in the adopted chapter, which we already have at the state level. So that's my feeling on it, is we have to show the amendments someplace. And this is where we need to show them, is in the chapter, which we've already adopted.
If I think that one of the things that I was thinking about is when you list the specific section to NFPA 130 and then say as modified below, and you have not a 4001, but a 4801 section, and then the NFPA sections are listed out, for chapter 3 and chapter 5. I think that's what kind of probably throws me off a little bit. What's keeping us from just saying in accordance with the following, and it would trump the NFPA 130, and then the numbering would be 4801.1.1, 4801.1.2. Is that something, Chris, is that part of it that is offsetting to you, is the fact that the numbering goes from 4801 to then the 3s and 5s, or is that not as much of a sticking point?
Oh yeah, that's definitely on my list too, but I don't think, because they need the rest of the junk in 130. So
I see.
This is just stuff they want to tweak in 130.
And for bulkiness, I don't think, the only other option is to re-show all of 130 in chapter 48 and then make those modifications. And basically you're not, that's the other option, but then you're making it really bulky.
Okay, so Ray, real quick for clarification, because based on some discussions I've had, I want to make sure that we're doing this right moving forward. When we are making motions on these proposals, whether they are denied, if you will, by the tag or approved, do they go to BFP?
Yeah.
Regardless.
Yes.
Okay.
I like, when I give a report to the BFP committee, what I like to do, if the tag decides to deny the proposal, I make sure that the BFP committee knows that the proposal's been denied. But I also and then I bring up all the things that that the tag worked on, the modifications, if they want to see them. But I always like to let the BFP review proposals that have been denied before going on to council.
Okay, so
that also gives the person whose proposal it was a chance to speak at the BFP if they'd like to.
Okay. So that being said, the reason I bring that up is because I think we're at a point where we probably need to take a roll call on this, and after a motion is made in a second, but I just want to make sure the motion is read correctly. This will be simply for an approval or denial at the fire tag level. And then, but regardless of what that ends up being, that will be presented at BFP.
Yes.
Okay.
I just like I said, just give them a list of the things that that the tag decided not to act on.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so at this, go ahead, Chris.
Oh yeah, sorry, I got more. Next question, and it's less about the amendment, but more about applicability of code. Are stations typically located in the right of way? Mark, maybe that's a question for you more. Like, are they?
I'm thinking about that, and I think it varies. I think,
Okay.
yeah, the one that came up is not on the right of way. It's actually on a parcel between an arterial and the freeway.
Okay.
Yeah. So
because the one I'm going to see down here is probably going to be in the right of way. And then that makes me think about the applicability of the building code, because it does not apply to the right of way stuff in the right of way.
Yeah.
So how do we permit it then?
Right. That's a whole nother question that I don't know if I have a good answer for. And yeah, if it's not permitted, I mean, who's doing the review of building code issues, if not the building department?
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, I think what else are you going to do except apply the building code? I just don't know how to make it apply technically.
Understood. Yeah. Yeah, that issue, I think that issue came up in Seattle, didn't it, Ken? I believe that's why a lot of the original amendments to NFP 130 were in the fire code, because I think the fire code had jurisdiction, more jurisdiction right away than the building code did. And but I think what we've learned is that there's a lot of means of egress stuff in NFP 130 that isn't well correlated with the building code, and that's the other proposal I have. And the building department is in a much better position to review and make judgment about a design meeting code than the fire department is, because that's their expertise, is to understand means of egress. And so we talked about that a bit as we were going through these two proposals in Seattle, and it sounded like there was maybe some work to do on that front to clarify the role of the departments with respect to reviewing and approving stations that are in the right of way.
So Tony, I have one more thing to maybe bring up. Now, what you were looking for a motion to move this forward or not move it forward? Is that what you were leading to when you started?
Well, ultimately, but it's really about approving it as written or denying it, because either way, as far as moving it forward, I mean, because they all get moved forward. So that's what I was trying to just clarify with whoever wanted to make the motion, which, whenever someone's ready, they can on that. So
I just want to be careful that we are, we are aligning with the building code, because that's the number one code. If they need, I was just saying, I hate to see the building code say, let's move this forward, and the fire tag say something different. And then, so I don't know if it's like a group meeting that we should have with the building tag?
Well, ultimately, let's say that one group, obviously, I'm not sure how this would look, but if one group says nay and one says yay, then ultimately that's going to come down to the BFP to push it to council, right?
Yeah.
And maybe that's what happens. I don't know.
Okay. Okay. I just want to make sure that we have all our options open on what could happen.
Ken, go ahead.
All right, here we go. I'm going to make a motion that we approve this proposal with the modifications made by staff with the renumbering. So it's as submitted with the modifications done.
Okay, we have a motion. We have a second.
Yeah, this is Kevin, and I will second the motion so we can open it up for further discussion.
Thank you, Kevin. So we have a motion and a second, and being that the discussion will continue to carry on, let's first, just to follow Robert's rule, let's open up discussion to those that made the motion and seconded first. So Ken, do you have anything further right now?
Yes, I just believe this is our state has already adopted NFPA 130. We are updating this chapter to a new chapter. We are updating the edition referenced, the 130 edition reference to the 2020. And there are some appropriate amendments that need to be made because of state of Washington local issues that have been brought up by Sound Transit. And we have to show those in a statewide manner. So there's consistency between the jurisdictions where this rail is being done. It's very difficult for, I could see Sound Transit to have to deal with the local requirements of each jurisdiction without a starting point. This gives us that starting point. It also allows the local jurisdiction to make amendments on their own now to NFPA 130 by referencing what is going to be hopefully in the state building code and fire code. And if they want to tweak something locally, they can. And if somebody, like Quinn brought up the 1,500 square feet, if they want to do something differently, they can make that modification here and not have to go through a additional 130 adoption and amendment process. They're just amending the state code that references 130. And I think it just is our method that we have available to us, besides having to do it jurisdiction by jurisdiction. And it's a great starting point. That's all I have to say.
Thanks, Ken. And Kevin, would you like to speak to your motion, to your second?
Well, as I mentioned, I seconded the motion only really to open it up for further discussion. Maybe I shouldn't have done that, but I did because I'm in support of the changes that they've made on here. I guess what I'm still struggling with is the way it's written. I mean, in listing in portions of NFPA 130 in this. We don't do that in any other parts of the fire code. I mean, we have chapters that address stuff in 903 that just says exceptions. You follow NFPA 13, but then, this overrules or trumps the 13 stuff in a couple different areas. So I was hoping that maybe we might be able to, I don't know, get this maybe slimmed down a little bit, like Chris had mentioned, with out all the other verbiage in there. But so that's, I wanted to second it just so we could have some more further discussion and see if there's any other ideas out there.
Thank you, Kevin. Let's go ahead and open it up to other TAG members for discussion at this time.
Excuse me, this is Meg. regarding what Chris said, and I believe what Kevin just said, I think we had a similar discussion about basically editing a standard last week, or the last meeting we had, where the standard itself was trumped by whatever was in the international code for that specific requirement. And that requirement at that point happened to be type 1 hood ducts and the requirement for sprinklers within the duct. So I see where they're going with this in terms of consistency in referencing standards.
Thank you, Meg. Is there anyone else who would like to discuss this? Chris, go ahead.
Oh, for clarification on the way it's written, is the amendments to NFPA 130, is there only the texts that are struck out or underlined, where there's no strikeout or underlined, for example, like 5.4.4.3?
That's correct.
Is that text in NFPA 130 the same?
It is, yeah. And then,
So what was the choice to include it here?
well, my understanding was that I think part of it was just for context. I think for the tag to see the full section, but also potentially clarification for the code user. But yeah, you wouldn't necessarily need to include those 4 sections that aren't amended at all on the sheet that's shown. Those could be dropped without really losing anything. I think that's a good point. So that would thin it down to some degree.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know which is better, to have the whole section or to have less stuff.
Yeah, you don't want to show it crossed out like that, because that would mean that we were deleting it.
That's for, once I accepted it, they would just disappear.
Okay.
That was just changes. Would we like to see those removed?
Well, they serve no purpose other than what, just to help show how the rest of that section ends. But if somebody was worried about, brevity and making this smaller, then absolutely we'd want to remove this, because somebody still has to get the NFPA 130 document and use that also in addition to this.
Should,
This is Matt with the Department of Health. Are there other sections? One point of clarification: are we focused now just on process rather than content? Anyone? Is the content of the proposal generally accepted?
I believe that the motion that was on the table, the roll call would have addressed that, because I don't know that was decided. And so if at this point we want to make changes to this document with the motion that's on the table, we would need an amended motion, and the original motion, the person who made that, which is Ken, would have to agree to that amended.
And the reason I was just curious, are there no other places in Chapter 9 where a state amendment could be seen to effectively amend an NFPA standard without striking through the language of the NFPA standard?
I'm not for sure on that.
Say that again, Matthew. I'm sorry, I didn't.
So I'm just, if it's about process, I was wondering that we don't already have a state amendment. Say we've got a number of amendments to Group I occupancies in 903. Is this in fact an amendment to the NFPA standard without striking through the language of the NFPA standard? So the broader question is, if the concept presented in the amendment is generally acceptable, is there another way to introduce that change into the codes we work with, rather than trying to strike through an NFPA document, which there's the challenging, generally speaking, my answer is we don't amend NFPA documents. Those are standards adopted by elsewhere. So I'm just looking for another way to get to the same end. And maybe we do already, like we modified the group I occupancy for sprinklers. I don't know that language could be read in direct conflict with the NFPA standard, which was effectively striking out the, NFPA 13.
So
I
I
think I'm tracking Matt now.
Yeah,
I think
I'm tracking that too. My feeling is what we could do is what I think somebody was thinking of, is that we would have our chapter 48, which this would be, we would put in these code changes that are all in here. And then somebody's going to have to use the look at the conflicts between the Washington State Code and NFPA 30, and the code would take precedence based on what's in chapter 1, that the code takes preference over the reference standard. So we would just be creating specific items in here, and wherever there was conflict, the code would take precedence. That's what I think would be the solution. It's just a numbering issue.
Okay, and Quinn, go ahead. You have your hand up.
Yeah, there is precedence that we can make modifications to standards. If you look at chapter 19 of the IBC, they do it for concrete. So they've already done, we've done modifications to standards. So it's something that we can do. And then like Ken was saying, we could do it through chapter 48 of the IFC.
Thank you, Quinn. Appreciate that.
Would it help anybody if we did something like that? Would that help the code user? Or whatever, it's 30, right?
It's 130.
130. Would something like that in our modifications help the code user?
It may. I think it would end up looking, it'd be NFPA 130.5.4.4.1.
Okay. So I'm just trying to, but I just hear some people, I can understand as a code user where I would get a little mixed up too, by missing one sentence, but I just thought maybe that might help.
And that's where I was saying, trying to find a way that, do we need to reference the standard to make the change?
Yeah, because if you look at IBC 19, it says, like, for example, section 1905, modifications to ACI 318. So this would be 48 modifications to NFPA 130.
Yeah, I think I
somebody
know.
Can somebody pull that up so we can see what he's talking about?
What was that, Ken? I'm sorry.
Quinn, do you have that in front of you, that document on your screen?
I do.
Can you let Quinn share his screen real quick?
Go ahead, Quinn.
Let's see, where is it? I haven't shared in this format.
Should be very bottom or very top, right in the center.
I'm not seeing it on mine. Let's see. Oh, there it is. Okay, so let's see, wrong one.
He threw you under the bus, didn't he, Quinn?
There is a subtle distinction that the concrete folks and the fire folks may take different approaches to how their documents are amended.
Are you guys able to see it?
Not yet. Did you get like the, oh, there you
There
go,
it is.
coming up. There you go.
Oh, so they still put it in the code numbering system, but then after it referenced the ACI 318 section 18.5. So that would go back to us using the 48 numbering, and then right after you would put NFPA 130 section da-da-da.
That'll be consistent with how the IBC does it. Yeah.
I like that a lot more. I think that's extremely clear. It's cumbersome, but very clear.
And we would want to do this in the building code chapter 31 and then the fire code 48, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so I would like to remove my what the heck did I do?
You can amend
My
your
motion.
motion.
No, I'm not gonna amend my motion. I want to
Okay.
remove my
Okay.
motion because I would like Mark, I would like to table this, have Mark come back with a renumbering so we can actually look at something that because I know staff's not going to have the time to do this, to be able to do all this renumbering, but if we take to look at what was done, we could table it, have Mark come back with the renumbering for chapter 31 and also 48, and then we'd take a look at it, the following meeting. So I'm just going to table or remove my motion, and if somebody else has a different motion, that's fine, but my motion's gone.
Okay. I think that as a group, we're all in agreement of that. Is anyone against tabling this to get the numbering right and then bring it back at our next tag? Anyone against that? Okay, I think we're in a good place then.
And the only
Mark.
thing I would suggest is maybe if Mark can find a way that there's an open chapter in both codes so the numbers can be the same, that might help life in the future. I know the IBC stops at like 30 something, so maybe there's a way for us to use
Oh,
the
I see.
same
Same chapter.
and just call it fixed guideway stuff, and then it's all in one place in both books. Just another thought.
Yeah, I can look for that, if that makes sense. Yeah, you guys, you meeting every Wednesday at this point?
Every other.
Every other, okay, good. That gives me a little more time.
And Mark, if you need any help, like with copies of the code sections or something like that, just let me know. I can work with you.
Okay.
On that as well.
Yeah.
This is Ray. I'm sorry.
Yeah, thanks, Ray. Appreciate that. Yeah. So we have another proposal on means of egress, which is more of a building code issue, but it's reprinted in the fire code, and we use the same approach. And there's a whole lot more of this kind of stuff in that proposal. And there's just so much correlation that needs to happen there to clarify it for the code users. So I'm just wondering, is that something, I guess, so are we going to look at that proposal today as well, or is that on the agenda or not?
Has the building code looked at it yet?
They have. It was reviewed and approved last Wednesday.
Is this one that's on our log numbers right now? Is that what you're, sorry, I was trying to look something else up on the scheduling for the tags and I kind of missed the.
Mark, was it one that you submitted?
It was.
Okay.
Actually, Kim Williams is the proponent for Sound Transit. KYM.
Number 75, maybe.
Oh, there it is. I see it. Okay. I'm pulling up the link, not the actual edited document. So if we need to make changes, I'll pull up a different document.
Okay, so we're good on tabling the one, and now we're moving on to a separate one. And Mark, you're ready for that one? And do you want to tackle that one now?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is another proposal that is intended to correlate the code and the standards. So chapter 10 of the building code and the fire code addresses means of egress. NFPA 130 has a lot of subject matter on means of egress, and they don't clearly correlate. And there's some confusion on the subject. Various jurisdictions have amended the code through their municipal codes in a lot of cases, in other cases through amendments to the fire code to address some of these issues. And we're seeing quite a bit of inconsistency in interpretation of this, and it is resulting in confusion with plans examiners, some delay in getting our permits, and just a lot of additional time and effort to get through all of this. So this proposal is intended to address those issues. One example of something that's relatively different and unique about NFPA 130 is that the occupant load for the platform, where people wait for a train or arrive from a train, is determined by basically the ridership, and that's addressed in NFPA 130 very clearly about projecting the ridership and how many people the platform needs to account for means of egress, and it's based upon a train that's got a full load, which is 800 people, plus the people waiting at the platform for that train when it comes in. And those are both based on, people waiting on the platform is based on ridership. So that's NFPA 130's approach, and it also requires that you do an analysis and you apply an algorithm to make sure there's enough egress width, and the travel distance will allow people to evacuate the platform within 4 minutes and reach a point of safety in 6 minutes. So the building code applies means of egress very differently, and assembly occupancies, for example, will load a platform at either 7 square feet per person or 15 square feet per person, depending upon how it's interpreted. And that's one of the things that's varied from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. Some apply 7 square feet per person and others apply 15. And so we've literally looked at this and tried to come up with a good correlation that makes sense. And what this proposal outlines is that the means of egress would be based upon NFPA 130, and that the occupant load factors for the platform would not apply. And that's why this table here refers to section 4001, which points them to NFPA 130 to determine the occupant load factor for the platform, with the only exception being the concourse and lobby. And we proposed the occupant load factor of 100, which is consistent with airport terminals and ferry terminals. So that's a quick overview. There's just all sorts of different items that come up on this. There's elevator issues, there's travel distance, common path of travel, and a variety of other topics that are in this proposal. It uses the same approach where we walked through every section of chapter 10 and identified where there's conflicting or potentially confusing contrary language in NFPA 130, and clarified where chapter 10 applies and where 130 should apply. And we worked through this with Seattle Building Department, and we also got feedback from City of Bellevue, and both cities have local amendments, and this proposal draws from both of those historical amendments to the codes and clarifies subject matter further, so that we have consistency. This particular section here refers to security grills that are typical at the main entrances to stations that are secured. Stations that are above grade and below grade are secured at the entrances after hours, and those grills come down. Sometimes they're wide openings because they're maybe 8 feet wide to accommodate the circulation. The means of egress width is associated with that security grill, and those are always open when the station is in service. We were proposing that it's okay to close those after hours, provided that there's at least one man door next to it for employees who may be working in the station after hours. And just to clarify that is acceptable, because security grills are not considered a component of means of egress. So having those, it just isn't, there isn't a code path to actually have those. So this clarifies that it is okay to have those, similar to some other provisions of the code. So that's a specific item we were adding as an exception for stations. Yeah, you can scroll down as I can point out some of the other items. I think exit access travel distance is addressed in NFPA 130. And so the amendment here is in the footnote, section 4001 at the very bottom there.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, you can go back up. So generally exit travel distance is regulated by that table in the building code, and for assembly occupancies, it's 250 feet per sprinkler building. And we just amended that to point to NFPA 130, which allows a little bit more travel distance. NFPA 130, I think, allows 325 feet. So it's a modest increase to allow for the travel distance, considering the stations are often relatively long platforms with exits at the far ends. So that addresses that issue. And again, just correlates it so that there's not confusion for the plans examiners when they're looking at the building code that says one thing and then NFPA 130 that says another. That's a really good example of where there's confusion and applying the code and the standard. Just the travel distance issue is a really good example of it.
Okay. Thank you, Mark. Appreciate that.
Yeah, there's a whole lot more, but I'll stop there and see if there's any questions on this.
Any questions up to this point from TAG members? Okay. Mark, if you want to keep summarizing, and then we'll, once we get to the end, we'll discuss.
Yeah, so this section here talks about construction type, and NFPA 130 refers to NFPA 220 for construction type. And, you know, the state of Washington adopts the building code, so we thought it would make more sense to point to a code that actually has construction types that plans examiners are familiar with. So instead of referring to NFPA 220 for construction type, we're clarifying that, you know, we want to just apply the building code. So this proposal just correlates what NFPA 130 would call for construction type under the NFPA standard for construction, and just including the construction type under the building code, which is they're all non-combustible type 1 or type 2 construction. So that's just a pointing to the standard that people are familiar with in Washington for construction. No substantial change in actual requirement there. This section on ancillary space, and referring again to 101, which isn't adopted otherwise or used except for in healthcare pretty much in the state. Again, we're reporting back to the building code on ancillary spaces and incidental use. So that section of the code, which our plans examiners are more familiar with, can be applied to the station as well to separate ancillary space, which is typically like an S2 occupancy, from the platform, which would be an A3 occupancy. So just applying those same principles that would be applied if it was a building. This next one is just pointing to chapter 8 for interior finish, rather than again pointing to another chapter in NFPA 101. And then we get into chapter, the section in NFPA 130 that refers to means of egress. So indicating here that clearly, if you're in 130 and you're reading it, and you read the amendment, you actually understand that you also need to meet the building code, not just NFPA 130, and that can be confusing as well. So it points to, yep, apply the building code, but also, you know, NFPA 130 applies as modified below. So this is very consistent to the sprinkler proposal, where we're adopting and modifying sections of 130 with respect to means of egress. So it correlates. Here's the section on travel distance. So above, we're pointing to this section from the table that talks about travel distance, and then this is the modification in the standard that actually addresses it so that they correlate. So the travel distances there are addressed. So we're going with a standard for open stations, and then for enclosed stations, we modified it to actually make it more strict and limit it to 250 feet because those are enclosed stations and they have a greater risk. So that is consistent with the building code, but better correlation, no inconsistencies. Yeah, this section, there's not much amendment there. I think a lot of it's there for reference, so you can see the full section when you're reviewing this proposal. So escalators, I think just scroll up a little bit. Escalators, where'd that go? Yeah, escalators. So right there, there's a section in NFPA 130 that allows escalators to be used for more than 1/2 of the required means of egress. We have not done that. We would never propose that. It's allowed in NFPA 130, but we are striking it because we don't think it's something we'll use. We don't think it's reasonable. So that just makes this standard more restrictive than it would be otherwise by striking that. Escalators used as means of egress is actually very rare. We don't have any right now in the system. In any of our stations, there's not much plan that I'm aware of, except for potentially one station in Federal Way where I think 1 out of 7 exits is going to be an escalator. So that's pretty rare. So it's in here in case there's a need, but it's pretty uncommon.
Mark, this is Kevin. Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
You're striking out that section on escalators. Is there anybody on the tag? I mean, I realize it doesn't fit for sound transit.
Yeah.
But does that mean we want to get it completely out of this revised standard for everybody else? I'm just wondering, does that?
Yeah, so this standard is specific to fixed guideway transit systems, so it only applies to right now to sound transit in the state. I don't know that it of any other agency or company that it would apply to, except for except for light rail.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think we can scroll down a little more, see what else we have. We're getting toward the end here. And these are just carry forward. So again, there's a security grill section that correlates with the building code above, and just to make sure that if you start your research with NFPA 130, you'll learn about the security grills. If you start in the building code, you'll also see it points to the standard. So they point back and forth so that it's clear and that they do correlate, that they are allowed. It's okay to have a security grill with the door next to it, as outlined in the amendment. Horizontal exits are not very commonly used, but it is in the standard, so we just modified that to point to the building code rather than to NFPA 101. Just again correlating, trying to remove all of the references to NFPA 101 and all of the references to NFPA 220. Because that's subject matter that's already addressed in the building code. So these are the kind of things that really are confusing in the code right now that we're trying to clean up. Means of egress lighting is addressed in the building code, so very clearly in chapter 10. So we're just striking then at 101 references again, and that might be most of it. I think that we may have skipped over the means of egress capacity when we went through this, and we may want to just go back up because there is more language on means of egress that we modified up above. Pull mine up, see if I can find the number. Yeah, it's 532. And it would be down. So this proposal goes through building code amendments first, and then it switches to, there we go. So there we go. We may have skipped over this. So so this is the language that's in NFPA 130 that determines the means of egress for the platform. And so the occupant load, the width and the timed egress analysis would be used for platforms rather than the traditional approach of assigning an occupant load to the platform. So this is the section that is included. There is an amendment here that refers to a challenge that is faced where a station is serving a major event like venue, like Husky Stadium. And what we've learned is that it's really important after a Husky football game to limit access to the underground station there right after the game, because everyone's leaving the game at the same time, and it's important that the platforms don't become overcrowded. And because of the surge that comes with the end of game, it's necessary to manage this administratively rather than through design. So that station is sized, the means of egress for that station is sized to accommodate all of the people coming and going to the university during normal peak business periods. And NFPA 130, the principle behind it is that your means of egress for your stations are designed for peak commuter loads, peak day commuter numbers, right? So when you put the station to serve a major event, a venue like a stadium or a convention center, that's also factored in, but there's exceptions, and NFPA 130 addresses those, and it indicates this language is actually in the appendix of NFPA 130. And we wanted to bring it forward to make it clear that, yeah, we do acknowledge there's going to be stations where we're going to probably have to have people managing access to the station after major events, so that the station doesn't become overcrowded. So this language makes that provision clear and allows the fire code official to make that a permit condition for the venue or for the station. So it could be a assembly occupancy permit condition, is that, yeah, to get your operating permit, you need to manage this at the end of an event. This seemed like a good item to bring forward to make it clear that, that this administrative control complements the requirements for construction.
Mark, this is Scott at the University of Washington, and I'd like to speak in support of this because we've seen through when we do have those events occur, it's been beneficial to have these administrative controls in place. It may be frustrating for the public, but it does allow us to, to really get that occupancy load on the platforms at a manageable level.
Yep, thanks, Scott. Appreciate that. And right now we have this in place at the UW, and also a station down near the Soto area where we have other stadiums, and we expect this will also be applicable when we build a new line that goes by the Seattle Center for that station. What we expect it will be, we'll need it there as well. It seems like the design and the numbers we account for work well for people coming to the game, for example, because they come to the game over a 2 or 3 hour period, and the station handles that just fine without overcrowding, no issues. It's just that surge at the end where it's happened so fast is where we need these controls. Yeah, so.
Sorry.
Quinn, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I have several. So I'll start with the first one since we're on this page here. For the travel distance, this isn't the right or wrong question to answer. For travel distance, should we allow for an allowance? I know that in the previous discussion, we talked about sprinklers. And so you don't mention any sprinkler allowance for exceeding that 100. So, I don't know, it's something that you might want to consider or not, it's just a thought. The other thing is the reference standards 130-20. I noticed that you put it in the IFC chapter 80, but it's also not in the 2021 IBC. So we probably want to include that in the IBC as well. And going back to similar to my first question about the ancillary space, you didn't mention the area. So if we were going to rely on the plan reviewers, they're going to still consider 10%. So is that still the intent, or, the 1,500?
Yeah, it would be. All those provisions of the code would apply, right?
Okay.
Yeah, so that's the idea, is just to point through the building code and let those provisions apply as they would elsewhere.
Okay. And then again, going back to that previous proposal, in terms of changing the standards, if we can redo it where, similar to that chapter 19 numbering system. But
Yeah,
otherwise, I like it. Otherwise, other than that.
Sure. Yeah, I can respond to the question on the travel distance if you want to pull that back up. I think it was a really good observation and something I did think about. So what we did here is you can see the unamended language from NFPA 130, where it just allows 100 meters regardless of the type of station for both open and enclosed stations. The travel distance is the same, and that didn't make sense to us. So we amended it to clarify that higher travel distance is only applicable to open stations where they're open to the atmosphere and smoke and heat would readily vent. And so for that reason, it seems reasonable that a longer travel distance is acceptable, even if it doesn't have sprinklers, because it is an open atmosphere station. But we also amended it to make it clear that for enclosed stations that have to be sprinkler protected, per that other proposal we put forward. And by the way, NFPA 130 doesn't require enclosed stations to have fire protection. So that other proposal actually makes that very clear. It's required in Seattle for local amendment, but it isn't required otherwise. I think in Bellevue, they also have an amendment that enclosed stations have to have fire protection throughout, but it isn't required in the NFPA 130 otherwise. So this acknowledges that, yeah, we're not going to go beyond the 250, which is the same travel distance that's allowed for an A3 assembly sprinklered occupancy. So that aligns with the building code.
Thank you, Mark. Is there more in this document that we need to go through? Or did we?
I think we've hit the high points. There's a whole lot of explanation
Sure.
that I've included, that if people want to better understand, some of what's been written, there's really good information there, and I encourage everyone to look at that if they haven't already.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Okay, so let's open this up to discussion for TAG members. Is there any questions, comments, concerns over this that's in front of us? I think we're in the same boat on probably not making a motion, because I think the numbering and the breakdown, we would want to be consistent with what we saw in chapter 19 of the building code at the state level. I think we're all in agreement on that. And so we probably wouldn't make a motion on this one for that same reason. However, as far as the contents of it, is there anything that TAG would like to discuss?
This is Meg. I have a quick question on 5.3.2.2.
5.3 point what? I'm sorry, Meg?
2.2. Is it on the screen? Oh, there we go.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I guess I was wondering, in the middle of the underlined sentence, it said when required by the fire code official. Is that the intention, that the operating agency could not make the decision on their own?
Oh, well, I think we will, for our own risk, for sure. Where we feel we need to do it, but I think this just gives the fire code official the opportunity to require it, I guess, wherever there's a need, right? Because I think it's going to be subjective and probably based upon experience of what is being observed at certain stations over the life of the system. I think that's why we worded it that way, so it could be applied. But some of these things are hard to define. Like we haven't really you know, like major event isn't really defined, right? So.
Do you
So
want
it's-
to maybe say or as? Because I think the sentence is saying that you're going to do it. Or as. Instead of when required by the fire code official.
Okay. I think that would be a fine amendment to the section. I think we'd be fine with that.
I'm
I
making notes.
believe it. Yeah, I think that's
sorry,
good.
Okay.
There was a one-word amendment to this by the building code council. I think it was the only modification that they made, and I think it was. Boy, I can't remember. It was just a clarifying word, and we may need to get that from them and make sure there's consistency. But I think that what they had proposed is different, but consistent with what you're proposing.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
This is Matt with the Department of Health. On a more macro level, is the appropriate way to address these changes to write them into a broader amendment rather than seek to amend the source document? And I guess the other question is broadly, is it that this is not adequately addressed in the model code? Or so we need 130, or could it be bypassed so you wouldn't have to modify 130, but still be able to insert the content into the amendment?
Yeah, it's a good question. NFPA 130 is actually a really substantial document. It's quite long. And when I first started, looking at, what Seattle had done and what Bellevue had done, I kind of struggled with what is the best way to do this. And I was thinking of what is going to be the most clear to the user was my intent. And by modifying the standard very specifically and being really clear about, when it applies by having pointers in the building code to it, seemed to be the most intuitive way for the user to understand the intent. And and another option, if Bellevue's got a pretty lengthy municipal code where they've adopted and amended the NFPA 130 in a separate, basically in a separate municipal code. It's a specific to light rail, and I think they just say, section blah 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 of the building code is, or of NFPA 130 is modified as follows, and there's language that points back to the building code to again to correlate it. That's just my. I think this is more intuitive for the user to do it this way.
And I follow. I'm with you there, because I use NFP, and I should clarify. I apologize. It wasn't so much the modification of 130, because I think that's been covered. It's a very specific document. I meant the 101, because I use 101 and the building code side by side routinely, almost exclusively. And so what I was curious of is whether or not the means of egress issues that are in reference to 101 are adequately addressed in the building code. So you could just say more broadly as an amendment that means of egress shall follow the building code. And then you can cut that out of it, cut the NFPA 101 part out, unless it's not adequately addressed in the building code. And you do need, then I would say take what's good from 101, rewrite it and port it into the amendment. So you could just take what's useful, as opposed to trying to reach into a stand NFPA 101 through this code and modify it. It just seems a little less awkward. And then more broadly, I can confidently say that people aren't routinely using NFPA 101 for means of egress anyway. That's just from my experience, and that's what the model codes really tried to. And some of the folks in our department have been working at the national level to align those documents as closely as possible, because people are only going to use one, and we want to make this stuff easier to use for everybody. So.
Yeah, no, I'm aware of that process, and it's a good one, I think. Yeah, so to answer your question, is the means of egress issues are adequately addressed by the IBC. We do not need to refer to NFPA 101 at all. And so, yeah, the idea here was just to make it clear, if you're reading section 5324, trying to understand what that means for the task you're working on today, whether you're a designer or you're looking at a plan later for a permit review, that it's clear. And otherwise, I mean, this is repeated in here a number of times. The other way you could do it is just say where NFPA 130 refers to NFPA 101, see the building code. I think that it could be done that way as well. And then the sections where we're only making that change can be removed from this. I think that would be another way to do it.
Hey, Mark, I got a question for you that I've discussed offline with other people. Is tell me about restrooms. Tell me, are there other local jurisdictions that have been applying restroom provisions for these stations, and have they amended their municipal codes? How's that come into play?
Yeah, there are many. I think we ran into that in one jurisdiction, and we are providing restrooms there. We have provided restrooms in a few stations. We really prefer not to provide restrooms because of all the challenges that come with them. And there is an amendment in the building code in chapter 30, whatever it is, that actually indicates that it doesn't apply. I think it's under the assembly section that the code doesn't apply to fixed guideway transit stations. And that was adopted in the last round of the IBC. And that provision is carrying forward. So we don't expect to be required to provide restrooms in stations in the future.
And there's no restrooms on the trains, correct?
Right.
So when I'm riding from Angle Lake all the way up past Seattle area, what's a passenger supposed to do?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. So, yeah, there is a station between the two that will have restrooms that's in the design. That's the only, I think, well, we got them at Northgate. So we've got one north, and we've got one midway coming in on the way down to Tacoma on the light rail. So there will be those. But yeah, that particular proposal went through, and it was before my time, but I think there was quite a bit of support for that, given the, all of the security and issues that come with having restrooms at these stations.
Okay.
Hey, Mark, this is Quinn. Sorry about this. I noticed in one of your paragraphs that's not part of the code, it does say certain aspects of the IBC apply to the means of egress, guards and accessible means of, for example, guards and accessible means of egress. So I'm not familiar with NFPA 130, but does that basically reference any accessibility requirements, or does it?
No, that's why it's really important that we clarify, and I think it's pretty clear, but this makes it more clear, is that chapter 10 applies, right? And that's one of the first things that's in here, is that you need to meet chapter 10 in the building code, as well as this standard. And that captures all of those other provisions. And there's a lot of them that really are in chapter 10 that apply to stations. Accessible means of egress, guards, handrails, the rise and run of stairs, the treads, all those provisions apply. And then, because NFPA 130 doesn't address a lot of those things. So the idea is, again, is correlating these two construction codes to clarify that fact.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah,
Thanks.
it's under 531 and you want to scroll up under the general, just up a little bit, you'll see where that is. I think it's just up one page at the top. You'll see 5.3.1, yeah, right there. So if you're reading this standard right now, unamended, you can just apply it and not realize chapter 10 applies. And we're saying, no, go look at chapter 10. It also applies, except it's modified in chapter 10 and in this standard.
So that's funny that you bring that up, because I was just looking at the building code amendments to our current section 31, where we have a 3114.2. It says means of egress. The means of egress for fixed skyway transit and rail system shall be in accordance with NFPA 130. So we told them to go to 130. Now we're telling them to go back to
Yeah, Ken, I think that was last cycle when Sound Transit came to us. They said the whole reason for referencing 130 was because AHJs were getting on them for stuff they didn't want to do for means of egress.
Yeah. So
That's right. And the big issue that I think resulted in that being put forward was whether or not the occupant load for the platform was calculated per NFPA 130 or the IBC, right? Were you applying a load factor or were you using the ridership? When I started looking at this, I realized there's a whole lot more that really needs to be clarified than that. There's tons of stuff.
Okay, so Mark, of the stuff, the purpose for referencing NFPA 130 is to accomplish some standard that talks about items not addressed in the building code, right?
Yes.
And the reason Sound Transit came last cycle was to address means of egress specifically and how to calculate occupant loads, correct? Or were there other items in NFPA 130 that are necessary that aren't addressed in the code?
There are, and that's why this proposal is more comprehensive to address all of those issues regarding everything regarding means of egress is accounted for in this proposal, not just the occupant load for the platform, but all the other specific requirements that are addressed in either the building code or in NFPA 130.
Oh, no, I just meant, like, is there something, could you build a station to the building code, but have a different way to calculate occupant load and be satisfied? Could we trash can NFPA 130 and just tell people how to calculate occupant loads and tell people when and when not stations require sprinklers and be in a better place?
Well, there's so much more in NFPA 130 besides means of egress. Are you referring to just the means of egress portion of it?
No, there's
all sorts of tunnel ventilation, fire protection, and smoke control, and all sorts of other stuff that's in there.
So
really important and relevant to what we're building. It's really an important standard, and I think we have to follow that standard, for other reasons, probably for, I'm not sure, but I'm guessing for
FERC or whatever. Yeah. I guess where I'm at is it's the same. I totally think NFPA 130s make sense. I am stuck in a place where I'm approaching the problem in a completely different way. I think these fixed guideway stations are unique and don't have to be addressed by the building code, and we should be doing these with a performance-based design every time, instead of changing the code and throwing all of these amendments in here for one entity, which is a big entity, but it's not the same as when DOH has an amendment for adult family homes, which there are probably thousands of in the state, right? These are very few projects. They're very large, they're complicated and complex and have strong design teams behind them that could do a performance-based design. But we're trying to put a square box around this thing that is not going to be able to be captured by a square box. And every time we find something that's going to be not fitting in the box, somebody's going to be back here asking for another amendment. And this thing's just going to grow and grow and grow. And pretty soon we're going to have more amendments in here for fixed guideway than we do like the rest of our code.
So Chris, I look at this a little bit differently, meaning that once we have this in the code, you then can use alternate materials and methods, I think, a little bit easier if you want something tweaked, because that is, you know, now more part of the body of the code. I'm not too sure, but I understand the whole performance space because we use that in several different areas. And that would be something that, you know, somebody could present if they wanted to, a performance-based option already, right? As an alternate materials and methods.
Yeah, and that was my argument 4 or 5 years ago, was we don't need this. This should just be performance-based design or an alternate means, and we're really not talking that many projects, so it should be not too crazy.
You know, I understand that. I think that could work in some of the larger cities where the jurisdictions have the capability of considering performance-based design. But you know, that Sound Transit's growing in every direction, and we're extending into many jurisdictions. And some of the jurisdictions are relatively small, and they don't have the capacity to deal with performance-based design, and they really rely on prescriptive codes to be able to do their plans examination and you know, issue permits. And you know, some of the jurisdictions we've worked in, you know, have adopted NFPA 130 and amended it. Others have just adopted it and not amended it. A few haven't even adopted it. And so by getting this something at the state level, at least provides a good basis for any jurisdiction to start from. They at least have that to go by. And I think there's a couple of examples where the local municipality, for example, didn't even adopt NFPA 130 because they just didn't have the resources to go through the process of adopting it. It was that difficult for them. So I think that underscores the benefit of trying to do a state amendment. And I don't expect that we're going to be coming back with a lot of changes. I think that the idea of doing this, addressing these two kind of key issues, fire protection and means of egress comprehensively, is to do it well and to get it on at the state level, and then just apply it. You know, I think we've made some attempts in the past, probably didn't think about it as broadly as we needed to. And these proposals are hopefully more thoughtful about that. And they've gone through a fair amount of vetting already with some folks that, you know, have already applied the standards and are familiar with them. So I agree, there's a lot of detail here, but most of the amendment will be in chapter 40. The amendments to the chapter 10 are pretty limited. They're primarily just pointers to point you to the other section for the exception, to clarify where you should look at NF 130 rather than the building code. That was the whole idea of it, so that, you know, there's less confusion.
Okay, Mark, thank you for your presentation on that. Just to clarify, next week, this will be going to the building tag, is that correct? Or has it already gone through the building?
Building tag approved this last week, and it's so and forwarded to the next I guess full council, whatever the next step is, I forget.
Right.
BFP.
BFP, yeah.
Okay. I think at a minimum, we're going to want to see the renumbering to be consistent with the other section we just went over.
Okay.
And so if you could do that, then I think that would give the members of the TAG time for some of this to soak in a little. And then
Sure.
at that time, we can make a motion here in a couple weeks.
That sounds great. I'm just wondering if the renumbering is appropriate for the fire code change proposal. I assume we'd want to do something consistent for the building code version of this. And I'm wondering if it would make sense to connect with that group, just to give them a heads up that this is something that you guys are considering.
Yeah,
I think
That
that
is
would be a good idea.
Yeah, that's something that we can do. I think Chris and Corey are on the building code tag, right? And I'll probably attend, and I can bring something up too to tell them what our thoughts were as far as correlating the numbers, and then I guess when you come with the renumbering, the building tag can look at that too, or we can look at the BFP and then correlate those. But at some time we're gonna have to have that correlation meeting that Ken's been talking about and Tony's been talking about, to get all the numbering lined up.
Yeah, okay. That sounds perfect. So thank you very much for your time today. I appreciate it. And I will get to work on that renumbering.
okay. Thank you, Mark. Appreciate that. Okay. Ken, are you available? I'd like to take a small break here. Are you up for going over any proposals that are a little less intense than those? Something that where we can check off some boxes. And if not, that's okay. I don't know if Ken's available right now. He might not be. Let's do this. Let's take 10, and then let's come back, and then we'll see if Ken wants to just get a couple of the easier ones out of the way so we can check a few more off so we stay on schedule, since we're running out of meetings right now. And if he does, great. If he doesn't, then we'll move on to other business. So let's go ahead and take 10 and then come back.
You say take 10 or take 10?
10 minutes, yes.
Okay. Okay. I'll give you a chance to pull up the proposals log.
Hey, Ray, I had to jump off the train to find a restroom. Are we on break? You're muted.
Yeah, you're on break, but you
All
got
right,
10
thanks,
minutes till the next train.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Chris.
we'll wait for Ray to get back and go from there.
Ken, are you still on?
Yeah, I'm here.
Before you jumped off the train, Tony was asking if you had a couple of simple ones that we could start checking off the list on here.
I'm trying to look at the list. So the 5707 stuff, with the stuff that was just enacted July 10th, I think that's going to take a little bit of time because we're going to have to just maybe double check what was just approved and make that comparison. So that.
Are you talking 38 and 39?
Yeah, 38, 39, 40, 41, all of those, all the way up to 44.
Oh, yeah.
We're just gonna have to take some time just to, I mean, we're gonna have to just to see what just got into the 2018 code, and those, because those might have to get tweaked a little bit.
So how about we try like, let me see here. We could do
35. Didn't we take care of Dave's?
35.
Yeah, proposal 35. Wasn't that the get rid of the elevator or the sprinkler in the elevator pit? Didn't we take action on that and move that forward?
Was it one of the meetings I wasn't here?
I think so.
Okay.
Are we on record?
Yes, we're still on record.
Yeah, I believe we took care of that two meetings ago.
Okay, I will go back and look at the files and see if I can find that.
Could we do site safety plans, the 50131?
Sure.
44.
If I
Are we back in order now, Tony?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, which one did you just say, site safety plans? I'm gonna, let me highlight this one real quick, just so I don't forget it.
No.
Okay.
50131.
50131. Why can't I? Oh, there it is. Site safety plans. Okay, so that is number 44.
Oh. I wonder why, because you were probably in you were in chapter 33, weren't you, Tony?
Is this a bad time for it? Do you want
No, this is perfect. I mean,
okay.
all this was just a cleanup, because the section, I believe, that references the site safety plan is actually in 3303 and 3308, but it gonna change if we end up going forward with that other proposal for the rewrite of 33. But right now, if you look at chapter 33 in the 2021 fire code, and we'll see if I'm trying to pull that up right now. See, 3308 is explosive materials. 3303 is the owner's responsibility for fire protection, where the site safety plan is referenced in section 3303. So that's the code change proposal.
if 33, if we end up ultimately going to,
Renumbering, we'll have to coordinate with this code change.
got it.
But
You're talking down transit one?
no. If there's a code change proposal to renumber or reorganize chapter 33, and if we reorganize chapter 33, this will probably need to get amended. But we haven't got that far yet.
Okay, well, let's just make a note on that, and then we'll see if there's another one we can. Thank
This
you.
way, as I'm going through it, I'm just not cutting and pasting something when I start putting in an OTS document.
Okay, so going back to our list.
So do we need a motion to just move this forward right now as it exists?
Well, if we go through 33 and we decide on that, we could probably just jump right back to 44 and just push that through then with the change. So I'm thinking we'll just table this.
Well, what happens if the 33 doesn't go through?
Then at that time, we push it through as 3303 is what I'm thinking. I mean, unless you want to do it now, we can do it now.
I would take, we're cleaning things up. I would go ahead and take a motion to accept it with the modifications I made, because the modification to the proposal is that we renumber it with the other one that we watch for renumbering.
Okay.
That's
All
how
right.
I modified the proposal.
Understood.
So that way we can get it marked off our list.
Sure.
And you can always fix renumbering stuff, right, Ray? Even if you can always fix editorial renumberings as long as it's just, if something moves around or gets screwed up, that's always open for you guys to fix.
Yeah, we try to correct them on the 102, but we've been, the editorials are easier to fix, but they got to go through a process.
And here's reality is the next printing of the 21 code might have caught this already.
The chapter 33?
Well, this reference right
Oh,
here.
this one. Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, and I don't know what we're using as our latest and greatest. So I don't know. It could have already been cleaned up. I don't know.
Okay, well, then we're looking for a motion to push this forward.
I'll move to push it forward to the BFP.
Thank you, Chris.
Okay.
Thank you, Ricky. The second. All right, so discussion. All those in favor, aye.
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 Any against? Okay, excellent. Motion carries. So let's jump to our next one.
You ready for number 46, Ken? Mobile fuel preparation?
Yeah, let's pull it up, see what it looks like. They're so old now. Well, five.
I love the confidence in this group. Okay, okay. I said that was 46. All right.
What is this? Oh, geez.
Oh, this is the one that we parked so that Sean and I could talk, I believe, isn't it?
Well, it's sort of.
Or part of it, okay.
I think, what was I doing here? Read down to my explanation here. That this was a renumbering. Oh, and I added the word that. So a couple things is we still have the chapter 9 stuff that Chris and Sean were working on for this 106.6.25, but my note says it's an existing amendment. The word that which I added in exception 2 for clarity. So I just wrote down, where is it?
Underground piping.
Yeah, underground piping that serves, because before it just says underground piping serves a fire protection system. I added the word that for clarity. And then the one above under the permits, and I just added what is kind of already our language, but I added it in the permit section, or utilize LP gas systems for CNG systems. Isn't that already in our chapter 3 amendments for mobile food preparation vehicles? I think it might be in our definitions, I'm sorry, in chapter 2. That makes sense.
That makes sense to me.
Well, heck, if I got Chris to agree with me, then I might be just right.
Or yeah, probably not. Probably just wrong.
Okay, so is this something we're still holding off on though, until we get some further?
I think, again, this is one that we move forward, but then we correlate because again, this is in chapter 1, the permitting section. So if we make changes someplace else, because it was, then we need to address it. But right now, this is just for clarity.
Yeah, for the 105.6.25, we need to make sure the language correlates with the proposal 134, which we'll probably talk about. We could talk about it next. We just want to make sure that, because that's where Ken/Sean put in some new language for the exceptions to clarify. That doesn't quite look like this. So just want to make sure they're the same.
Okay.
Compared to proposal, what one was it?
134.
Oops. 134. Oops. Okay. What number is this log? What number is this one here? Did I say 46? Yeah. Okay. All right. Are we?
Yep. Okay, so that's good. So let's do with that verbiage there, and we'd be looking for a motion to approve this.
I'll move it forward to the BFP.
Thanks, Chris.
And I'll second it.
Thank you, Quinn. Discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
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 Any against? Okay, motion carries. Thank you. Are we at a place where we could go to 134, or is that work group still figuring that out?
Yeah, we can go. I can tell you what I realized.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, 134.
Chris, you don't need me to grab Sean, do you?
No, we figured it out. Well,
Okay.
yeah. So my concern and why I wanted to look into it and talk to Sean about it was the applicability of it on combined systems. After talking to Sean, I understood more why it was his proposal that got some changes in here the first time, and he's trying to clean it up a little more. It has to do with the RCW and the WACs about the level U licensing. What the intent of this section is to say is if you need a level U license to do the work, you've got to comply with NFPA 24. But a mixed supply, domestic fire supply on like a 13R system does not need to comply. And it's poorly written, but that's not Sean's fault. He tried to do it as best he could using the same language that's in the RCW. So where it was all clunky and what I was having issues with is kind of copy paste out of the RCW. So it makes sense to kind of just leave it. And I am sufficiently convinced now that because in that first sentence where it says dedicated to supplying water-based fire protection system, that is enough for me to interpret that any combined system, I don't have to apply this section. And by adding the extra exception at the bottom, we're just making it easier to see that we don't really need to be looking at combined services on 13Rs. I see Ricky nodding his head along because you guys don't want to be doing those either. So, yeah. So I'm okay with it was as written now that I understand what he was trying to do with it.
Okay. Excellent. With that, is there any discussion? Okay, so we'd be looking for, we would like to change our tag action from special work group to basically move to approve. So that's what we're looking for.
It's Chris, I'd move to bring it forward to the BFP as submitted.
Thank you, Chris.
Meg, I second it.
Thank you, Meg. Appreciate it. Discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
I
Aye.
Any against? Okay, motion carries. Thank you. Okay. What about number 48? Ken, what do you think of that one? General definitions.
yeah, we might as well just open it up. Again, don't remember it.
All right. Sorry, I'm talking to myself.
202, 902. That's not it.
I'm out of practice. It's been a month. So 48.
Yes.
How is this? Scroll down to the 5, section 5, so I can remember what the heck this is about.
You said, what section did you say, Ken?
The 5 where I try to explain my.
Oh, 5. Oh, I thought you were talking section 5. I was like, what?
Okay, so current state amendments, which is the definitions. And this one might be something that already got fixed. Got to double check. Showing the existing 21 base code language with appropriate underlying strike-throughs. The section 902 edition is based on section 918 alerting systems where these two terms are used. So we need to double check our current Washington state amendments, which I need to pull up for this chapter. Give me a second here to find.
Oh, I see what you're doing, Ken.
Okay, so is it?
I think
They're
not listed there now, I think is what I'm seeing. Yeah.
Okay, so they're not listed in the 902 section, right? Yeah, I'm scrolling through too. Yeah, so we don't list them as Washington State amendments for 902, but they are used in our 918. All right, so the current state amendments, if anybody wanted to pull them up and show them, we don't amend section 902, but we have two terms, alert signal, alert system, that are mentioned in our 918 alerting systems. And I believe they are part of our amendments to chapter 2. Which
They are, yeah, and they are, it is mentioned in 918. I have 918 up right now.
okay. So both those terms are mentioned.
Let's see, I'm seeing alerting systems.
And alert signal.
But Ken, didn't all that stuff go away? They no longer list the defined terms in the chapter, in the model code.
Oh gosh.
That's what I'm seeing in the model code. I think that's how it used to be done.
Well, no, I'm looking at the 21, and I'm just, example would be like 502, it says definitions.
It's not in chapter 9 though.
The words are in chapter 9, but the actual definitions in chapter 2.
No, there's a section 902 definitions.
Yeah, it's the title of this definition, but you still go to chapter 2.
Yes. Yeah, okay, yeah. So Chris is right. The definitions aren't spelled out, but you go back to chapter 2 to look at the definitions.
No, I mean, I'm looking at on my screen right now. I have the 2021 building code, or maybe it's not the. Do they do it different in the fire code?
I think they do it differently.
Yeah.
Oh,
fire code is
never
different.
mind. So we're still doing it the old way in the fire code. Okay, that's where we get tripped up.
Us fire people call it the right way.
So, okay, so this would move alert signal and alert system into 902 since it's mentioned in 918.
Yes, and it's already in our current definitions in chapter 2.
Yes, okay. Okay.
So the other thing is, if anybody wanted to look at any of the current definitions in chapter 2, and we're like, wait a minute, does that make sense? Do we still need all these Washington State amendments that anything change? Which I don't know if anything has off the top of my head.
Let's see.
I mean, I don't know if any of these other definitions, if this is just a correlation thing that we're just going to have to double check.
Ray, for your benefit, I think on correlation wise, this is not one we would correlate.
We would not.
No, because 902 in the building code is fire pump rooms. 902 in the fire code is a list of the words that are defined terms.
Okay.
So it's weird that it's one that we would definitely not correlate between the two.
The only correlation would be in the definitions themselves.
Correct.
Yeah.
And then I just put those in chapter 2, right?
Yeah.
Let's, so I'm looking at the shelter in place and the recall signal. Both of which are not in the model language. So we're gonna wanna keep those. Portable school classroom, we're gonna wanna keep going up there, Ray. Let's just kind of do a quick overview of these. The R4 makes sense to keep struck.
Our course not adopted in Washington State anyways.
Right, so we're just looking, this is just a quick overview to see if we want to keep it as is, right, Ken? That's part of this?
Absolutely. Just want to keep it as we already have it proposed.
Okay,
I do have a question. This might not be the group, but for adult family homes, I know they recently through legislation increased it from 6 to 8. Is that something that we want to at least have someone look at?
And that's the reason it will be up here at the top is that definition. And if that definition changed, we probably want to.
yeah, thank you, Quinn. What we'll do is once we get to that, then let's go ahead and examine it. I don't think anything has changed in childcare facilities, but again, if someone sees something here, then speak up. So adult care facility, is that the one that you were talking about, Quinn, or is that?
No, adult family homes.
I'm sorry, okay. I don't know if Matt's dialed in on these ones or not, but unless we don't hear anyone speak up, we'll assume that they're good.
Fortunately, the building code is the sole repository of requirements for adult family homes.
That's right. Sorry about that, Matt. Thank you.
Is this still gonna, didn't we do something in 903? Will that change? I thought we just talked about something in 903 and we changed.
That's just a reference there to NFPA 13D.
Oh, okay, okay.
Still good with hospice care centers for I2.
You think, is it 6 to? No. Did I pass something, did you say?
No, keep going, you're good.
On that one right there, 6 to 16 person, it says shall be classified as R4. Should we change that to something else?
It's adult family care, isn't it? Because,
But we don't adopt R4 though, right?
right,
So-
exactly, that's what but then the numbers would change too because of legislation.
Where are we at? I1.
This is something we'd probably want to correlate with the building code, right?
Definitely.
Yeah, I'm assuming that they already fixed it and we just didn't get it over here.
Okay. Oops.
This is Paul with Department of Health also. I wanted to point out the residential treatment centers is still is different in the building code for I1 condition. It's no longer I1 condition 2. It could be a couple of different occupancy types.
Which one were you talking about, Paul?
I1 condition 2.
Right here?
No, up.
Oh,
I1.
Oh, I got you.
Keep going up. You were talking about R4s and
I got you. I'm sorry.
and so the residential treatment facilities can be potentially like an I3 or I mean R3.
We did not catch it in the building code, at least in the 2018. That R4 reference is still there. But it's not in the definitions, it's in the chapter 3 occupancy classification section.
Correct.
So if we removed R4, we'd have to change the title too, right?
No. We'd have to decide what to replace it with.
Yeah, that's that's what was kind of meaning. We had to. I just I thought that was the whole point of that legislative end of it. Did we want to do something with this condition too? I was just waiting for guidance.
So the current chapter, or I mean, the language is now just to look at chapter 246337 for an occupancy type. So it doesn't necessarily mean that residential treatment facilities will be classified as I1 condition 2. So you can, I mean, technically you could cross out that, but I think there's other language in the building code that just says look at chapter 246337, which is still in development.
So
No, up here in the when it talks about the WAC 246337.
So that's the current state amendment.
No, I think it was actually amended for the 2018, so this is not correct.
Great.
It just, I think I mentioned it before, it just hadn't been correlated.
Yeah, page 27 of the Washington State Amendments, I think still reads that way.
It's because I'm wondering this 24.6. That's a. I'm trying to figure out that WAC number, because if it would have been changed on us, it would have been like a 5154A WAC, or then a number.
That's a residential treatment facility WAC. That so let me open the
On my code in the 2018, it still has that there.
Huh.
So it sounds like we may need to correlate with the residential care facility WAC and the.
Well, let me just see if what I guess what I'm talking about is the IBC fourth printing amendments.
Okay, so if that's different in the, do you have that pulled up, Paul?
I'm trying to find it here.
Okay.
Just real quickly, while Paul's trying to look that up, I do have a question on the next item down, which is 5 or fewer person. Automatic sprinklers installed in accordance with section 903 or P 2904. Since we didn't adopt chapter 29, should we even have that in there of the IRC?
It's fine, Quinn. It's an exact duplication of NFPA 13D. So.
Okay, I was just curious. I've always wondered about that.
It just is reprinted in the IRC, so people don't have to buy more books, I think.
Okay, so it's in the IBC fourth printing under we're under 308.2.6 licensed care facilities. Do you want me to share my screen? Can I do that?
Yeah, let me stop. I'll stop sharing, and there you go. You can share now.
So right here under licensed care facilities shall be classified as one or more occupancy types.
You're not sharing yet, Paul, sorry.
Oh, it's not showing?
No.
Sorry.
There you go. There we go, cool.
So residential treatment facilities licensed, you know, blah, 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 for one or more occupancies types in accordance with 246337, which is, that's what the amendments to the 2018 IBC are.
So these are the insert pages, right?
Correct.
Do they have institutional group I1 in the definitions in the IBC on this document here you have, Paul? Oh, sorry, that's where we're at now. I'm sorry.
Yeah, they just live in a different place in the building code because they got
Yeah, I
chapter
got
3.
you. So, oh, I see, but this is for the institutional group I1. So
Correct.
that doesn't read the same.
Right.
Okay, so where he's reading residential treatment facilities licensed by Washington State under chapter 246, blah, blah, blah. That is in the fire code as the last sentence under institutional group I1.
Right, but it says to classify it as I1 condition 2, but in reality, it's been changed to be one or more occupancy types in accordance with 246337, which we're still working on.
Got it. Okay. Now I see what you're saying.
It's a little subtle change.
So do we add that last sentence?
I think so. Let me stop sharing. We can go back to the other one. How do I do that?
I think if you go to the top of your screen, there should be a little option box that comes down.
So stop share, red.
Oh, that page went away. Sorry.
Now you did it.
I screwed it all up, guys.
Buy them books.
Sorry, I don't know how to do that.
Let me see here if I can. There you go. I got you. I took care of you.
Oh, okay.
I got you covered.
Thank you.
All right. So we should add that last sentence right here.
Well, and like I say, it may be a part of the coalition, but I don't really. I just want to make sure it didn't get missed or whatever.
I think it needs to be added unless someone disagrees with that.
Yeah, I think if we add it now, then it's just less work for the correlation so we don't miss anything on the correlation. If we can.
Yeah, if you add that last sentence, but then you'd also have to remove that residential treatment facility up above it because it's a separate sentence almost. Yeah.
But would
So let me just read it since you don't. So it's residential treatment facilities licensed by Washington State under chapter 246337 shall be classified as one or more occupancy types in accordance with chapter 246337. I don't know, can I cut and paste it into the chat?
yes, do that. That'd be perfect. And then I will.
Because then we don't have to remove the residential treatment facilities. That still marries up okay. Isn't that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay. So where it says residential treatment facilities licensed by Washington State, where do you want to start that?
Well, really, I guess they put a separate paragraph to separate it from assisted living facilities.
Uh-huh.
So another paragraph under condition 2.
No, so where it says and, just before residential treatment facilities, do a new paragraph there.
Okay.
And just repaste that, what I just put in the chat. Here you go.
Oh no.
But minus the and.
Shoot.
Minus the, oh, yes.
The other item I'm noticing too in the state amendments is under the group I.1, this is the building code. How we have our laundry list, they also include residential treatment facilities as licensed by Washington State under chapter 246337. So
Is that what they have?
Okay, hold on here. Because in the amendment, you have assisted living facilities separate from the residential treatment facilities. So you shouldn't be crossing out that first part because you still have to classify the assisted living facilities as a group I1 condition 2. See what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
That's the point of this change, actually, because it can be classified as more than one occupancy, or not more than one or more of the other types of occupancies rather than I1 condition 2.
But I think in the amendment, though, it still lists, it has them separate. The assisted living facility is separate from the residential. So it's 2 paragraphs. And the assisted living it's a standalone, which is a classified group I1 condition 2. The residential treatment facility.
Yeah, I see exactly what you're saying. So yes, the I1 condition 2 for assisted living should still stay the same. But you have to cross out and residential treatment facilities.
Yeah.
Right there, cross that out.
All the way over to the 246337 WAC.
There you go. Good catch, Quinn. Okay, are we good on that?
no.
Why? How dare you?
Okay, so how come we just don't get rid of that language that was previously in there and we look at the state, the building code amendment under 308.2 and just do exactly what they did and amend where they amended it. They amend if hold on, I'm going to share my screen.
Corey or Chris, are they working on any part of this right now in the building tag? Like they might be editing something and we're going back to an old way.
I don't remember them doing that, no.
All right,
I don't think so.
Okay. Make sure we're not doubling up on our work here.
All right. Okay, can you see 308? 308.2. So they amended it right in those 2 spots. Why can't we make ours look like that?
Yeah, I'd be okay with that.
Yeah, I would agree.
Can you
And
cut and paste that into the chat, Ken?
okay, Mr. Staff. I don't know if this is gonna.
I have faith in you. You can
And
do it.
the only other question is just making sure the adult family homes and licensed care facilities, if we want to include that into the fire code. I don't know if it is at the top of my head.
I'll look.
I got to make you do a little bit of work over there, Ken, so you see what I go through.
Adult family home.
Yeah, it's
Thanks, Kevin. Have a good day.
I think it went in the chat, but I don't know if you're gonna be able to figure it out or not.
What do you mean?
Because it's a lot.
It's a lot.
So what did you say, Tony? Is adult family homes defined?
It is, but I'm gonna paste it into the chat because it's not the same.
All right. So that's how we want. So that's adult family home, not
In the 18 insert pages, that's how it's listed.
Listed in the fire code, right?
Yes.
Okay. Which is different than what's listed right here in front of us in the building code?
Yes.
See, there's a reason I method to my madness and why we're
Yeah, it's kind of funny. The fire code adopted the IRC definition and not the IBC definition for adult family homes.
Huh. So I got Tony's chat, but I didn't get Ken's.
Yeah, Ken's is. Oh. Yeah.
Is it in there?
Oh no, it's not. It never came through.
So you wanted adult family homes added, right, Tony?
Well, that and licensed care facilities we just have to look at, and licensed care facility, unless it's under licensed care facility, isn't in the fire code amendment.
There we go. Ken got it.
Okay.
So we want, let's do this. I was afraid I was going to do that.
We're still seeing Ken's screen.
Okay. Then you didn't see my mess up.
No. You might be able to do a paste without formatting or one of those.
I think I got it. I just got to do, I just got to take out a couple spaces here. Yeah, I might have to try that. Let's do it. So let's do this. I'll share my screen here in a second. Not giving me an option of without formatting.
Hmm.
Dang it.
Yeah, the licensed care facility isn't. I can't find that in the definitions at all, so we may want to transfer that one over too.
So I'm sorry, I'll start sharing my screen. I'm over here working away and you guys aren't seeing nothing. And we'd have to delete these down here too, right? Delete all of these too.
Yeah.
If we wanted it to match.
Yeah.
And did you say add something else, Tony?
Well, we may as well add the next two sections since they're in the building code and not in the, well, unless they're not mentioned. Maybe that's why the license, that doesn't make sense though. Let me do a Control F.
The building code amendments don't scratch the alcohol and drug centers, assisted congregate. They still show them in there.
Yeah, it's on there. It's up here. It's on the,
Sorry.
how dare you question me?
in the insert pages for the fire code, if you do a Control F for licensed care facilities, nothing comes up. So maybe that's why it wasn't in the other one. But
I'm a little, I mean, I'm a little concerned, but not horribly concerned that the WAC might be right and the insert pages may be wrong.
That wouldn't be the first time.
Yeah, so I'm a little, well, I think I was sharing with Tony. I said this last code cycle, you figure right when we got into our editorial time, our year break between codes, we went into COVID. So it's like that's when we all started learning to work from home. And so what's on the website, in my terms, how I put it, is what's legal on paper, because that's what's with the code revisor's office. Not on when I say the website, when I say it's on the WAC website, whatever you pull up on the WAC website is what's legally filed with the code revisor's office right now.
okay, so with the, can we share the IBC? We have two things we have to address, and then we can be done with this portion. So share the IBC insert pages, whoever has those up.
I gotta stop sharing. Ken, do you still have them up?
Right now I'm looking at something else, but I
can. I can dig deep and get them.
Are you guys able to see mine?
Yes, thank you.
That's perfect. Okay, so 30825. That we need that language, right? So we need to replace the adult family homes we have in the fire code with that for consistency. Correct? We're all on the same, are we all on the same page there?
Yeah, that would make sense for me.
Okay, and then the next one down for licensed care facilities. That one does not exist in the insert pages for fire right now. But it is referenced, the 246.337, it is referenced in what we just put in for institutional group I1. So do we want to just add these two?
I don't think we need it because it's kind of redundant. Because they have
they're covered in the IBC.
Well, and it's also, we just put it in the definition under group I1.
Got it. So we just need to take care of adult family home.
Correct.
Okay, so let's do that. Let's take the adult family home from the IBC, replace that with what the fire code currently has at the Washington state level for adult family homes. And then we can keep scrolling. This is how I'm seeing that.
And
thank you, Quinn.
I'm having memories of past code cycles that licensed care facilities, I don't know if they're still, if that term is still appropriate, or if that is a amendment that has been brought forward because we don't remember why we have it.
For licensed care facilities?
Correct. Yeah, I remember a while back that I was trying to find where that was actually referenced. And, you know, we've have, I guess, can anybody think of what is that? Where is licensed care facilities used in the code where assisted living facilities or residential treatment facilities are not specifically used. I guess I had a trouble when I was doing the past correlation in code cycles. I had trouble locating where licensed care facilities actually occurred, and so where that would be applicable. So I think it was. I got the impression that that was just a definition. It was an amendment that got carried forward.
Is this a term that maybe DSHS uses, and then we just carried it over?
That was something that I thought of. Yeah, DSHS and other state license. Then maybe. You know, I don't, but like I said, I could never find what that applied to in the elsewhere. So that's just throwing that out there. So if it gets left behind, and maybe need to do a word search or something like that.
I thought we talked about that once before, and since they all had to be licensed, that's just how we worded it. If it was just a care facility, they had to have a license, so we just put licensed care facilities. Or
I think that can get confusing as well, because
Look at
what's a care facility?
420 of the state building code amendments has a whole section, says licensed care. Licensed care cooking facilities, 420.12. And then we also have it in 510.2 of our state amendments in the building code. And in incidental uses, it's used licensed care facility. So I see it's 4 different places where licensed care facility is, or 3, it's referenced to 1 that's defined.
And like I said, so at the 420.12, for example, it says it uses that phrase, but then says specifically group I-1-2 license under 38878A and 337. So I guess it's just a weird, I don't know that it's a necessary amendment, because you're under 420, so you know you're already in, you have an occupancy designation. I don't know. This is housekeeping though. This is happy to glad getting stuff out of the code that's no longer pertinent. So forgive my
no,
delay
that's okay.
there.
No, that's some good background. Thank you, Matthew. So let's take the adult family home and let's make that consistent with what Quinn posted.
And I think I do recall, sorry, one last thing on this one. Where this has come up in the past has been authorities having jurisdiction declaring when a facility was a licensed care facility, or applying a section of the code, applying a section of the building code because you happen to be a licensed facility more broadly than those specifically outlined in the code. So if I have a licensed daycare and I have a kitchen in it, all of a sudden I may have someone looking at 420.12 and applying a standard to my kitchen that is not necessarily meant to be there. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
After 3 hours, everything makes sense.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Let's do this. Is that okay? Let's go down to our eyes, because that's where we kind of left off, right? That's where we were.
I need to
There you go. Okay.
let me make this easier to read. I'm there.
And that's all good now. So just for the sake of getting through this section, because we should probably not. Okay, bye, Zach. Thank you.
That you want to get rid of the 308.2.
And I have a 1 o'clock meeting, so
You're losing our quorum, Tony.
yeah.
Okay.
So I'm going to make a motion to approve this as amended.
Thank you, Quinn.
Sorry, been a while. Second.
Thank you. Okay. We have a motion and a second. Discussion.
Yes, this is Meg. Not meaning to throw a wrench into the works, but we're matching this to the 2018 IBC amendment. For the building code, has there been a proposal to change that for the next code cycle? So are we kind of?
I don't remember talking about it, Meg. I'm on both tags. I don't remember it coming up. But
okay,
Ray, if you could check that before.
Yeah, Stoyan's on, so I'm sure he's been listening.
Okay.
So it might be brought up that under definition. So we'll keep our eyes open.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. Any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor, aye.
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 Any against? Okay, motion carries. With that, what we're going to do is we're going to move to our next agenda item, which is other business. Does anyone have any other business?
I would just like to know if staff is ready to talk about the changes at the State Building Code Council, if Stoyan wants to bring that up.
Well, yes and no at the same time, but since you asked, I would go with yes. So Diane is no longer a council member. She was replaced, and the new person doesn't automatically get her chair. So the new person is a new council member, and how the bylaws read, we will have Andrew chairing the council for the last 3 meetings of the year, and in January will be the vote for the new chair. And this is a recommendation from our Assistant Attorney General. So I reached out to him to clarify the language, and it was his recommendation. I intentionally didn't send anything to the council because I didn't feel comfortable sitting between Diane and the governor's office. So this is the information I can share right now. And I'll share the same information at the council meeting in September.
So the new members of the State Building Code Council, they are posted on SBCC's website, correct?
That's correct, yes. We have 4 new council members. We got 4 new council members in the last month and a half. We have 1 new ex officio member, Representative Alex, I forgot the last name, and we have 3 new voting council members.
All right, thank you.
Will there be a vote to put in a new vice chair in the case that Andrew is not able to make a council meeting? And if that's not the case, then what will happen if he's unable to chair a meeting? How does that work?
Well, it is a precedent. I looked up the history, and it didn't happen before. So I was planning to have an agenda item, and I will have the Assistant Attorney General there, Dirk, and I was planning to have a discussion there because I don't know the answer. Reading the bylaws, it doesn't talk about situations like this. So what it says is we have the chair, we have the vice chair, and we have the, how was that, chair pro tem?
Pro tem, yeah. Pro tem chair.
So this is how it works. Again, for situations like this, the bylaws doesn't address that.
Okay, thank you, Stein.
I guess I have one other question, Stoyan. So Andrew will be the chair of the SBCC, and then also still be part of the building, plumbing, fire tag, BFP.
Well, that's just something else that I don't know, and I thought about it. I don't know the answer. Again, this is why I was planning to have this, item for discussion. I don't know the answer. I wish I knew.
Well, you're talking to a room full of people that don't always have the answers either, so we're fine.
Well, it's again, I don't know if it happened before years ago, but I checked, I guess, the last 10 years. I didn't find anything similar. So I will rely on our attorney, assistant attorney general. It's not addressed at all in the bylaws. It's a good, item to think about. The council, if the council wants to address this in the bylaws, adding a new section, but currently I don't have the answers.
Okay, thank you, Stoyan. Is there anything else for other business? Okay, well, with that, then we are going to adjourn. Thank you, everyone, for sticking around for as long as you did and for all the work. That was a lot, I know, but we made some good progress. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.